Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world. Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, July 31st, 2023. We're covering all the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. We thank our friends at Fluor for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. The Department of Energy's Environmental Management Office spends a lot of time remediating the problems of the past. But that doesn't mean they don't have an eye on the future. Perhaps nowhere is that more evident than in EM's current push to electrify its gasoline-powered vehicle fleet. Sites like Oak Ridge are receiving their first electric vehicles, as shown here with UCOR's Ken Reuter and Oak Ridge DOE manager Jay Mullis. Other sites are further along. Earlier this month, officials at the Savannah River site celebrated the addition of over 100 zero-emissions vehicles to the Savannah River site vehicle fleet. Like the rest of DOE, SRS is moving rapidly from burning fossil fuels to using electricity to power a fleet of nearly 1,000 vehicles, fulfilling a Biden administration executive order. Here's Stuart MacVean, who retired last week as president and CEO of Savannah River Nuclear Solutions, DOE's lead environmental cleanup contractor at SRS.
Yeah, we actually had a ribbon cutting for one of our rack of charging stations that we installed in one of the central locations here on site that we call N area. It's our central shops area. And it's where our fleet is managed out of. And it was a second location that we had completed charger installations. It's where the bulk of that fleet ends up parking overnight and to get recharged. So we wanted to go out there and celebrate not only getting that set of charging stations set up, but also we had crossed the 100 vehicle threshold. So our first 100 vehicles had come in and been set up, and we're ready for deployment. So kind of a two-edged sword there, the charging stations and hitting 100 vehicles out of that first 615 that we want to change over to.
Well, SRS has converted over 10% of its light-duty gasoline-powered vehicles to electric. Crews are also installing multiple charging stations at locations across the site. This includes 8 fast charging stations near administrative buildings that will provide a 0 to 80% charge within 60 minutes, enabling a range of approximately 200 miles. A bank of slower charging stations has been installed several miles away in another location. A third block of stations is under construction in yet another area. The executive order states that gasoline-powered light-duty vehicles may not be purchased for use at federal facilities after 2027 if an electric version is available. We'll have more about electrifying the EM vehicle fleet after this from Fluor. The availability of adequate charging stations is a major concern for the future of electric vehicles, not only within the EM fleet, but in the country generally as the nation moves toward more electric cars. Will there be enough chargers to meet the need? Here's a report.
Grad student Victor Tran loves his electric car.
There's no oil change, no transmission stuff. It's really nice.
The only problem is finding a charger on campus.
I drove up to where I usually might charge. Looks like all the spots are full. It's really annoying that there's no spots.
We'll build out the first ever national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations.
President Biden's $5 billion program hopes to create highway corridors full of them. But experts say with 35 million EVs expected on the road by 2030, we'll need another 1.5 million charging ports, especially in cities.
It's easy to make it accessible to just about anybody, whether you live in a single-family home or whether you're in a city and you're depending on off-street parking or an apartment.
ChargePoint has been making charging stations for 15 years, testing them against the elements at its lab in San Jose.
How does it work? Take your phone, hold it up to the station.
Its CEO says its worldwide network of 174,000 chargers means you don't need to fill up every night.
You're topping up a little bit at work, you're topping up a little bit when you go shopping or have dinner.
Some Starbucks and Taco Bell customers will soon see chargers in the parking lot, for instance. But a full charge can take anywhere from 20 minutes to several hours. John D'Souza says that model is all wrong.
If you need it to be your one vehicle and work well, it has to work as easily as gas.
His company, Ample, builds robotic stations that swap in a fully charged battery for San Francisco fleet vehicles and Uber drivers in 10 minutes.
You don't even have to get out of the car to do the swap.
It's fully autonomous.
With swapping stations and standardized batteries, D'Souza says, you'll never have to worry about your battery getting old.
With battery swapping, you can keep that car for as long as you want.
Your range might actually improve over the life of the car.
Exactly.
Romano says within 20 years, drivers won't be anxious about finding a charger, will be anxious about finding gas.
When the dominant is electric, there are only going to be a certain number of gas stations that are going to be solvent.
Jake Ward, NBC News, San Francisco.
We'll have more after this from Fluor. To learn more about EM's plans to convert to electric vehicles throughout the DOE complex, we talked to Rob Seifert at DOE Headquarters. Here's that conversation. Well, we're talking with Rob Seifert, and Rob is the Acting Director of Infrastructure Management and Disposition Policy for DOE at Headquarters. And welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you to talk about the subject of electric vehicles today. And I'd like to start, if we can, by just laying out the problem. For those who may not be aware or may not know, why is there a need, even an urgency, to transform the DOE vehicle fleet from gasoline to electric? Why are we doing this?
Well, that is the that's the $1 million question, right? So we've got of course the president mandated each of the federal agencies to transition from gas powered to to electric. So just from that standpoint alone, there's a sense of urgency to meet the president's mandate to be 100% electric by 2035. Beyond that, DOE's mission, EM's mission, is to protect human health and the environment. And one of the ways that we do that is to take into account that we have a lot of carbon emissions through our normal operations, and this is one way that we can tie this transition, this process to go to 100% electric vehicles. To our mission to reduce those carbon emissions and help do our part to slow down global warming.
Okay, well, let's define the scope of the challenge here. There are about 650,000 vehicles in the federal fleet overall. That would include DOE. How many of those vehicles are in the EM fleet itself? And would that number include contractors?
Yeah, so 650,000 vehicles in the overall federal fleet. Within the DOE EM world, just environmental management, we've got just a little over 4,000, and that does include the contractor vehicles. And as a part of that, we're really focused on what we'd call conventional cars, vehicles that you would see, on the road, as well as light duty vehicles. Some of the trucks and things like that they're included. So what that does not include would be what we'd call heavy equipment. So a lot of construction equipment and things like that. So we're really focused on those light duty vehicles and smaller cars.
All right. I've seen statistics that show that the federal agencies overall replace about 8% of their fleet every year. And I was wondering, given that statistic, how long do you expect it to take EM to fully convert all its vehicles from gas to electric?
Right. Yeah. So at an 8% rate, we're looking at about 12 years or so, to convert our entire fleet just in the EM world over to electric vehicles. Of course, that assumes that there are no issues and hiccups in supply chain and things like that. So we are looking at opportunities to accelerate, to work with GSA, because I guess let me back up just a little bit, because one of the things that we need to understand is GSA, the General Services Administration, they're responsible for the vehicles. We lease them from the GSA. And so, one of the challenges, and I know, we'll probably get to some of those, in a little bit, is making sure that, enough vehicles are actually available, to convert over. So, so we are looking to accelerate, but, at the 8% rate, we come in right at the 2035, line. So we want to give ourselves some cushion on that. So that's where we are working to try to accelerate, our acquisition of those vehicles. And again, the vehicles themselves is an important part of it. But just as important as getting the vehicles is going to be getting the chargers, right? So again, we'll get to some more of these challenges a little bit later. But I want to go ahead and kind of put a pin in that one right now. So, the 8% rate to get to the vehicles, I think we're right on that average, and would meet the 2035. But we'll look to accelerate and beat that.
So by 2035, all of the EM leased vehicles would be electric. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, okay. That's right. Which includes. And the president did mandate for the light duty vehicles that we would actually be 100% electric by 2027, and we're on track for that one as well.
Okay. What happens to the older gasoline powered vehicles in this process? Will we still see gasoline powered EM vehicles around, or will they totally be gone? Will some of the new fleet maybe be hybrids that are gas and electric? So what can we expect to see there?
Yeah, so you'll definitely see some of the plug-in hybrids, some of the electric gas combinations. One of the things that that's going to be a requirement is, of course, you want to keep those batteries charged, because they'll, as long as that hybrid vehicle is charged, it's going to draw off the battery. It's when that battery gets low that it converts over to the gas, right? So that's so one of the mandates, until we can get all just 100% electric vehicles, the plug-in hybrids will meet the mandate, for the zero emission goal. But even in that subcategory, we'll be looking to convert those over. With respect to what happens to them, so again, GSA owns the vehicles, we lease them. So once we work through their schedule to replace all of our gas vehicles, those gas vehicles they go back into the GSA fleet. Now, and they will disposition per their requirements and their regulations. So, and I can't speak exactly to the way the way that works. I know they will have auction sales and things along those lines that old government vehicles, can go back out into the public commerce and things like that once they've cleared all of the pieces there. But but from a federal fleet perspective, once those go back to GSA, they'll be dispositioned per their requirements.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned chargers earlier as being one of the challenges, having enough chargers out there. What are you doing about that to create enough charging stations across the complex to keep these vehicles charged and on the road? I know there's some work being done at Savannah River now with charging stations. Can you talk a little bit about what's underway to provide enough chargers?
Yeah, so that one's really the tricky one, and as I mentioned before, supply chain limitations is one of our bigger challenges right now. Because you think about of course the federal government, 650,000 vehicles as a whole family, 4,000 within just the EM program. That's a lot of vehicles, a lot of electric vehicles, and a lot of chargers. And that's not to to take into account all of the private sector folks, the yous and the me's of the world who are out there buying electric vehicles, who need chargers at our home, and that are getting set up at all the places. So we're competing with all of these other places for these very limited resources. So Jimmy, just to give you a kind of a sense, right now we have 36 charging ports within the EM program across all 15 of our sites, and we've got another 105 that are planned to be installed by the end of this fiscal year, so by the end of September of this year. So that takes us to about 140, 141 chargers that we'll have by the end of this year, which is great progress. But keep in mind, we're going to need 614 total chargers, to account for the over 4,000 vehicles that we've got. And we've got some sites that have, really some significant land. I mean, you look at Hanford sitting over 560 square miles. You're looking at Nevada that's sitting at over 1,300 square miles. Idaho, big numbers, about 600, 700 square miles. So when you start thinking about, electric vehicles that are, we'll call it getting 200, 250, miles per a charge. If you get stranded out on the back 40, that's significant. So making sure that we have sufficient chargers, at our sites is going to be really paramount to success. So that's what I was saying. It's like, it's one thing to get the vehicles, and that's great. We can pat ourselves on the back. But if we have no way to charge them, then we just have a bunch of bricks sitting at the sites. And once we give up that gas vehicle, in lieu of the electric, we're not going to get, we don't have the gas vehicle to fall back to. So solving this challenge is going to be really important, and that's where we're working very openly with GSA to make sure that they understand our needs. We're getting the orders in place. We're being mindful about turning over vehicles until we have sufficient charging stations to go with these electric vehicles. And when and looking at total chargers, I mean, the site that is going to take the most chargers is Hanford out in Washington State. So of the 614 chargers that we need total for the EM mission, 450 of those go to Hanford alone. Wow. So that just gives you an idea of how much land mass we're covering. And you might think that a site like Nevada would need more, because of the because it's over twice the size of the Hanford. But one thing to keep in mind is we have some of our sites are shared sites with other programs like the National Nuclear Security Agency administration, and so they also have the mandate to meet these electric vehicle requirements. So we have charging stations and vehicles to meet our mission, but we're also partnering with with some of these other programs at the other sites, like Idaho and Savannah River and Nevada, so that we're not solely responsible for that. But at Hanford, for instance, that's an EM only site, so we have full responsibility to make sure we have chargers for that one.
Well, with 140 or so charging stations in place by the end of September, you must already have some electric vehicles on the road now on the EM sites. Out of the 4,000 that you're going to have eventually, about how many electric vehicles do you have operating today?
So we've got about 145-ish vehicles right now that are currently in service, and we are looking to ramp that up throughout the rest of this year. So we have goals to try to hit. I'm looking at my numbers right now. It looks like we've got about 236 orders pending for light duty zero emission vehicles. So just to give you kind of a sense of where we're headed with that. And I don't have my chart in front of me that shows the total numbers of other vehicles, but again, that kind of gives you an idea of where we're headed with that.
Well, let me take one more step in the weeds here. With the 145 that you have now, are you already seeing that division with Hanford having the largest number of those, or is it spread differently?
Yeah, so right now Hanford has they don't have the largest number. They've got about 35 vehicles in their fleet right now. Savannah River has about 60, and so we're looking pretty good at hitting those numbers for for the program. So but yeah, Hanford's kind of ramping up.
Okay. Let's talk about safety for a minute. You hear concerns from time to time about safety concerns having to do with these electric vehicle batteries. How is EM ensuring that safety is a top priority, as you do in other parts of the cleanup program, that the electric vehicles will be safe to operate based on their batteries?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and so there's we have some sites, particularly the waste isolation pilot plant or WIP site in Carlsbad, New Mexico. So this is an area, it's an underground mine where we disposition transuranic waste. It's about a half a mile underground, and there are very strict requirements of that prohibit us to use those types of batteries. In the deep mines. So when we look at meeting the requirements, of course, safety absolutely is our number one priority. Safety of our workforce, safety of the public. So it's not just that safety is a number one priority. I mean, it is success. And so when we evaluate the operational needs of the program, we take into account things like the WIP site, where that battery technology is not conducive to the deep mines, kind of operation. So we don't use them there, because we're not going to put our workforce in jeopardy, to meet these goals. And we think that it's certainly not the president's intent to do that either. So it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we're helping to identify and set what those safe operational parameters look like at each of our sites. For the sites, for the other sites that we have, use of the electric vehicles with the lithium batteries, it's safe. It's within our safety envelope. These things get taken into consideration when we do, our various safety scenarios and safety cases, to understand, what we're bringing on site. So just like with any chemical that gets introduced into operation, We have professionals who are looking at, what it is, what its capacities are, what its capabilities are, to ensure that everything gets used as it's intended and not not used as an off normal for an off normal purpose. And for something like WIP, we would consider that an off normal purpose if we put an electric vehicle with a lithium battery in the mine, because that's not what it was intended for. That's just not where we were, what we would use it for. So absolutely, the safety envelope is thoroughly considered as part of introducing the electric vehicles to the EM program.
From the standpoint of the average DOE or contractor employee, and we've got about 30,000 contractor employees out there, is there a learning curve in driving an electric vehicle? It could be that the first time some of these folks drive an electric vehicle will be an EM owned or EM product that's on one of the sites. Is there a learning curve? What kind of training is involved, or if any? What considerations does an employee have to keep in mind when they're using one of these vehicles?
Yeah, Mike. So this reminds me of a hilarious story. In my own personal experience. So there'll be a little bit of a learning curve, but I remember when we first got our the push button start vehicle at one of our sites, and I'm getting in this vehicle with my boss, and my boss is having me drive us somewhere, and I've got the key in my hand, and I'm looking frantically around. It's like, where's the key go? And my boss was very patient and very kind. He's just sitting there, and he finally says, "Are you having some trouble?" I said, "This is my first time in this car. I've got the key." And he goes, "Put your foot on the brake, hit the button, and it'll start." And I did, and I was a little bit flushed and embarrassed, but at the same time, it's like I didn't even know how to start this car. It's like once I get it started, I can drive it. So I think that as we do transition over into a fully electric, I think that really one of some of the biggest learning curves are going to be understanding the driving capacity. So again, your battery, it will only last for so long, and when you first get into a vehicle and it's like you realize a quarter tank of gas means I can drive for another hour, or if it tells me I've got, if my red light comes on, I've got about 15 minutes before I'm going to be pushing this car somewhere, right? So I think part of, part of the learning curve is going to be to understand, how far I can drive the car, when I need to recharge, how long to recharge. And so, yeah, absolutely, there's going to be, training involved to help the workforce, contractor and Fed understand, the limitations of the vehicle, where to charge, how long to charge, things like that. And of course, it'll be, part of it operational awareness, right? Because if you're in a plug-in hybrid, your battery goes dead, but then you can still rely on the gas backup for a short time, versus not. So if they're thinking they're in a plug-in hybrid and they're in a fully electric and the battery dies, they're stuck, right? So it's going to be learnings, along those lines. But I think that, one of the things that EM does really, really well is train its workforce, to manage in situations like that. And anytime that we introduce, new technology, whether it be a new computer or, a new way to log in or a new vehicle, we do a good job of informing our workforce up front. So it's not just learning on the job. You've got the the beforehand knowledge going into it.
Well, Rob, we've covered a lot of information here today, and it's been a very interesting conversation about what kind of awaits us in the future here. I'm wondering if, in closing, if there's anything else that you'd like to cover or say about the electric vehicle program before we go.
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, it's been an absolute pleasure, talking to you about this. And this is absolutely something that, I'm passionate about. My team is passionate about. EM is passionate about. The zero emission vehicles, that transition is just one piece of the overall presidential initiative to achieve net zero electricity. So again, this is just one part of that overall puzzle. To help to build a more sustainable environment moving forward. This is what EM does. We are absolutely committed to being good stewards of the environment, being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar, and we're honored to be a part of this effort to support the president's goals to achieve zero emission vehicle by 2035. So we're working hard to hit that. Other than that, I think I don't have anything else to add at this time.
Well, Rob Seifert, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
We'll have more after this from Fluor. As we continue our look at EM's plans to convert its vehicle fleet from gasoline to electric, let's go back to Savannah River, which has taken a lead role in this effort. Well, we're talking with Stuart MacVean today, and Stuart is the president and CEO, retiring president and CEO of Savannah River Nuclear Solutions in Aiken, South Carolina, the primary cleanup contractor for DOE at Savannah River. Welcome to the podcast, Stuart.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks a lot for having me.
Well, we're happy to have you here. And we want to talk to you about what's going on at Savannah River with respect to conversion of the vehicle fleet from gasoline to electric, which is the topic of our episode this week. Savannah River Site and SRNS have taken kind of a leadership role in the conversion of vehicles from gasoline to electric. I'm wondering if we can just start by talking about why is this important? Why is there a need and maybe even an urgency to convert the SRS vehicle fleet from gasoline to electric?
Well, Mike, it really, is a big focus area for this particular administration. The Biden administration is really looking hard at the energy needs for the country and where the energy needs in the near future are going to come from. If you look at the demand curve, it's pretty big. And so finding ways to decrease carbon emissions, moving towards carbon-free energy consumption is really a big focus area. And of course, down here at Savannah River, we always like to take a kind of a lead position. We're pretty competitive about staying out in front. And so we're always looking for ways to adopt new technology, new ways of doing business. And so that's actually what got us started, was this conversation that we were having with the Department of Energy's environmental management team about what's the art of the possible around our vehicle fleet. As you might imagine, Savannah River Site's one of the biggest energy users within the DOE complex. And that a lot of that comes from the fleet of vehicles that we have.
Well, how many vehicles are currently in the SRNS fleet at Savannah River? How many do you have now?
Yeah, so we actually differentiate the vehicles into light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty. You can imagine heavy duty gets up into the tractor trailers, that kind of thing. Light duty is going to be sedans, vans, and pickups. And I'll concentrate on those because that's really our first target area. We've got about 615 light duty vehicles. And the goal is to have all those swapped out for electric vehicles by 2027.
Okay. So you would have all of the light duty vehicles done by 2027 under your plan.
Yep, that's the target. Yep.
Okay. You had an event on site recently that got some attention relative to the electric vehicles. Can you tell us what that was about? What you did at that event?
Yeah, we actually had a ribbon cutting for one of our rack of charging stations that we installed in one of the central locations here on site that we call N area. It's our central shops area, and it's where our fleet is managed out of. And it was a second location that we had completed charger installations. It's where the bulk of that fleet ends up parking overnight and to get recharged. So we wanted to go out there and celebrate not only getting that set of charging stations set up, but also we had crossed the 100 vehicle threshold. So our first 100 vehicles had come in and been set up, and we're ready for deployment. So kind of a two-edged sword there, the charging stations and hitting 100 vehicles out of that first 615 that we want to change over to.
Well, that was a big reason for celebration. From what I've read and about the overall electric vehicle conversion nationwide, having an adequate charging capability is one of the biggest challenges in converting the electric fleet. How confident are you that SRS will be ready to provide adequate charging capability in the years ahead for your fleet?
Well, so I'm really confident. We've been very fortunate. Supply chain's been able to meet our demand so far. Like I said, that the ribbon cutting last week was for our second set of charging stations. We've got a third set that's actually being installed here in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to have 3 different locations scattered across the site where we're going to have charging stations, and we're installing those with various capabilities. So you've heard of level 1, 2, and 3 chargers. So one set is level 3 chargers, one set's level 2. And the idea is right at the moment with 100 vehicles, those charging stations are giving us enough capability to move around site and keeping those vehicles recharged. And we're using that as a pilot to scale up. And so how many stations do we have to have at what locations? So we'll get some history under our belt about where we are using those vehicles and how adaptable they are to the needs that we've got. And then we've just hired a consultant to come in and take a look at that data as it's developed and then lay out a master strategy for what is that charger station layout going to be around site. Is it all fixed? Can some of it be solar capable, portable solar, or is it going to be canopy solar? So we're looking at a number of different options between wired chargers to solar chargers that we can take advantage of. Because as you imagine, some locations we go to, it's not easy to get power to those stations. So we've got to have some other way to do that. So this consultant that specializes in this in the industry is just now getting ready to stand up in August to take a look over our shoulder, give us what that real plan should look like going into the future. And then we'll deploy that over the next couple of years.
Well, you sort of got into a little bit of the next question that I have for you. I wanted to ask you about whether there were any special challenges in providing enough charging capability, and one of those being supply chain. You apparently are okay on that front. Supply chain is not causing you any problems in developing the charging stations. Is that right?
If you can be flexible, that's what we've had to do. Is we couldn't get all the Type 3 chargers that we'd like, so we went to Type 2 chargers. They seem to be doing the job for us. So we've been adaptable in terms of, well, where do we need charging stations? What type do we need? Can we use others in those locations? And that seems to be working out pretty well, because then it just makes the supply chain more flexible. So there is no doubt that there's going to be a high demand for chargers, and electrical components across the country right now are one of the biggest challenges when it comes to supply chain. So that's one of those things we're going to have to look at really carefully in terms of how quickly can we actually get all of the chargers that we need.
I think a lot of people wonder when they hear about the conversion of a vehicle fleet from gasoline to electric, what happens to the gasoline-powered vehicles? You've got a lot of those, and of course, in the whole country, as we move toward more use of electric, what's going to happen to the gasoline-powered vehicles?
Well, in our case, our vehicles are all provided by the GSA. So we do a rotation every few years of all of our vehicles. So what we've actually been doing is, as we trade out our vehicles on their normal cycle, that's when we're bringing in electric vehicles, and GSA is making those purchases for us. And so then what they do with the vehicles is they sell them out on the used vehicle market. Now, there's been times in the past, you probably remember, when there was a big demand to get the old gas hogs off the road, and you take it in, you trade it out, you get a discount on a new vehicle, and then they would lock up that engine so it couldn't be used anymore. Is that something that's on the horizon? I haven't heard anything, but you can imagine that kind of a precedent could be used again here in the future as you make more gas vehicles available, but you want to make this switch to electric. What do you do with those older gas vehicles? So I think, you're going to see this kind of rolling wave of electrification of vehicle fleets and downsizing of the overall gas fleet that's available to the country. That's just my guess on that topic.
So we might run into a time in the future when gas-powered vehicles are called clunkers.
That's right. That's right. There's plenty of gas vehicles around that get really good gas mileage, but they are producing carbon when they do it. So, electric, you're still producing carbon if you're getting it out of an oil-fired plant or a natural gas plant. But the reality is that it's much more efficient than if you're using gasoline engines. So, internal combustion engine is probably what I would say.
Well, we've talked about your leadership in the EM complex in terms of converting to the zero emission electric vehicles. What about in the state of South Carolina? SRS is obviously one of the biggest employers in the state, and have the most people and probably the most vehicles. It could be. What is your role now in terms of leadership in the state?
Well, what I would tell you is we're keeping up with the state. South Carolina has made some tremendous advances in the last really 9 months to a year in the electric vehicle industry. There's been about $4 billion worth of investment in South Carolina in new manufacturing lines for electric vehicles. So we've got BMW, we've got Volvo, we've got Scout, that are new entrants to the EV production market, as well as we've got a number of EV battery manufacturers that have come to South Carolina and building out their plants right now. So I think what you're going to find is we're kind of tagging along on the same wave that you see here in South Carolina. So that's a pretty big investment in such a small state in a relatively short period of time. So I'm glad to see that we're right there with them.
Well, Stuart, I appreciate you being with us today on the podcast and the information you provided on the electric vehicle program. I really can't let you go without asking you about your upcoming retirement. I understand this is your last week at SRS, and you've been the CEO there for 7 years, since 2016. How do you feel about retirement, and what's up for you next?
Well, I think anybody that's getting ready to move on to that next opportunity, whatever it is, job or retirement, has mixed feelings. You get real close ties with the work that you're doing, the place that you're going to work every day, the people that you work with. And so I got mixed feelings about it. But I am looking forward to getting out into retirement. I got a really long bucket list of places I want to go to and visit. As well as a lot of projects and hobbies that I want to take up at home that I really kept on the back burner while I've been here. This is a pretty big job, keeps me pretty busy. And so taking advantage of the opportunity to get out there and swing the golf club every now and again is going to be pretty nice.
Well, it is a big job, and you've done it very well. I know you have the good wishes of the people from DOE at headquarters, and there at Savannah River and the state leaders across South Carolina and the employees there at SRNS. So I thank you again for being with us today, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Glad to do it.
Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world.